Theodora Ziolkowski is the author of the novella On the Rocks and the short story chapbook Mother Tongues. On the Rocks is a winner of the Next Generation Indie Book Award, and it's now an audiobook, and it's a terrific audiobook. Her work has received support from the Vermont Studio Center, the National Alumni Association, and Imprint. Her fiction, poetry, and essays have appeared in the Writer's Chronicle, Short Fiction in England, Prairie Schooner, among over 60 other literary journals, magazines, anthologies, and exhibits. In the past, she has served as poetry editor for Gulf Coast, fiction editor for Big Fiction, and assistant poetry editor for Black Warrior Review. She holds an MFA from the University of Alabama, where she was honored as a 30 under 30 alum, and a PhD in creative writing and literature from the University of Houston, where she was the recipient of the Imprint Marion Barthelme Prize in Creative Writing. Currently, she teaches creative writing as an assistant professor of English at the University of Nebraska at Kearney. She also serves on the faculty of the University of Nebraska Omaha's MFA program. Recently, and I think this is really terrific, she, among other wonderful things, she was named Faculty Mentor of the Year for undergraduates at the University of Nebraska Kearney. Her new book of poetry, Ghostlit, has been praised highly. Because I'm her mother, you won't believe anything I say. But so I will quote from some of other writers' comments about Ghostlit. It's been called a spellbinding and unflinching collection, astounding, visceral, and at heart poignant. Another writer has written, the poems of Theodora Ziolkowski's Ghostlit ripple with such self-assured strength that it is impossible not to feel stronger and more resolute for having read them. And the poet and novelist Kevin Proofer has written, Ziolkowski is a master of tight narrative, of Gothic energy, of intense psychological insight. Reading Ghostlit is like inhabiting a brilliant mind, a mind that never fails to be interesting, to be complex, and to be powerful. Please join me in welcoming Theodora Ziolkowski.
Okay, can everyone hear me? Yeah. Well, it's a very special occasion, and I'm really happy you all are here. I want to echo the gratitude to Andy and Gaia. This is such a beautiful space, and I feel really honored to read here, to read alongside the Upton, my mother, and I'll say more about her after I read some poems, but thank you all so much for being here. And the other, I'll mention too, it's special because, we were saying that it's the first time we're reading, with our books together. It's also my first in-person reading since the birth of my husband's and my son, who's 11 weeks old, or he'll be 3 months old this week. So first in-person reading. So thank you for being here. So Ghostlit, I consider it really novelistic. It has a lot of narrative energy to it, and it follows this speaker who, it's about a lot of different things, as collections tend to be, but it's really about memory, about trauma. The kind of central narrative is this emotional abuse narrative that runs through it, but it's really about the speaker or narrator kind of coming to terms with who she is now versus this past self versus this projected self. And so a lot of the poems really deal with memory, and I'm interested in memory and how the brain works, and did a lot of reading about that when I was writing Ghostlit. So to that end, I'm going to start with a poem called, it's a poem in a series of poems that take place at a memory care center. And when I was living in Houston, I had the privilege of working at a memory care center, and that informed a lot of my thinking as well. So the last thing I'll mention is that all of the poems in the collection, they have bleeding or spillover titles, so the title is also the first line of the poem. At the memory care center, the residents don't want to make Valentines. Still, I cut hearts with child-safe scissors. I was a surgeon, Reed sullenly declares as he colors. He fights to stay in the lines. Meanwhile, Edith has spilled the glue and Nell wants to start her card over. My lap is piled with hearts, so I hum Blue Moon because a familiar tune calms them the way my bringing home bouquets once did for me. I'd leave that Target with my cart packed with groceries, setting sunflowers in the passenger seat beside me. Now, the residents are singing louder, but I am still cruising along some dark road in Alabama, breathing in the rotting mouths of those flowers, when the former surgeon puts his hand on my wrist. "Don't get carried away," he says, taking my scissors. I lift my foot off the gas. This next one, Eurydice from mythology is she's very much a presence in this book, and this is kind of the first time she's mentioned. The speaker kind of sees her as this wedding dress, which we'll hear in the poem, but I really liked, there's a lot of foils in the book, and so Eurydice is one of them. Eurydice, the seamstress who laced me into those shoots of organza, shared her name with that gown. Seasons have come and gone since I tried Eurydice on, and she became no longer available. That is, on the web, the designer replaced her with another cut from a different cloth. New Eurydice is leaner, almost see-through in chiffon. She has a slit up the thigh to make some bride desired, and I want her. Look now how my mouth can perform a decent imitation of some virgin smile. I am not traditional. I do not keep Eurydice in our house. After we exchanged vows, we fed each other cake, but I ate all the flowers. In photos from our wedding day, I look puffed in whipped cream. What can I say? Eurydice was steam pressed into a box, and I can never control myself. This next one, there's I'm borrowing the language that a host on a podcast I spoke on used for this section of the book. He said that it was like a travelogue section. I really like that because there are these poems that some of them, the speaker is recounting something in Paris, and other times she's recounting something in Italy. This one's one of the Italy poems, but the section kind of does jump around quite a bit in terms of geographical space. When we were making our descent, some rock rolled into my path. At the bottom of Mount Vesuvius, the trees were black. The grove of seared branches made me think I was still in bed with my face in my hands. When he joined me that week, Italy seemed louder, the moon cast shadows. Sharing ensalata de polpo on that terrace in Sorrento, I forgot how to swallow. Meanwhile, boys in Amalfi drew nets of redfish. Men hacked trees while I peeled oranges, watched my fingertips bleed. What if I had fallen on that rock like he thought I would? Or was it that he proposed it and didn't worry? Or that he assumed my losing my footing was inevitable? The decline was something I couldn't handle. So often thought I was at risk for something I could not control. Mount Vesuvius, for example. Tourists can photograph the smoke and ashes. Understand that the journey up is different from down. Are there rules for addressing a body that's neither on nor underground? That eruption buried Pompeii. On my phone, I carry photos of the remains, plaster poured into pockets of ash to recreate the victim's shapes. For years, I tried to hold together a body that had already come apart. Pompeii was destroyed because of the direction the wind was blowing. This next one, the speaker kind of looks back. This is the one poem in the collection where the speaker looks back on her childhood. And I had to read this one because the Kmart that is in this poem is the Kmart that's in Easton, or is it still here? The Kmart that's in Easton, Pennsylvania, so that informed this poem. I was 5 and running errands with my mother. Kmart was the one-stop shop for you name it. And at that age, I refused to wear anything but a dress. As on Easter, I donned one shell pink skirt tiered. I wore a straw bonnet with it, my Mary Jane shoes. Later, someone who saw a picture of me in that outfit said to my mother, "It's too big, it doesn't fit her." At Kmart, I played lost in the labyrinth of aisles, my behavior rewarded with Kmart Cafe, patty robed in American cheese, lettuce like a slime doily I loved. When I married, the bouquet I carried and tossed was in memory of my grandmother Rose. Laying her down, roses cast the ground, beauty that clothes the stone. And I'm gonna finish with this poem. I hope this doesn't embarrass her, but the book is dedicated to my sister, and so Cece. And so I would like, because she's here in the audience, I would like to read this poem where the speaker's sister is very much present in the poem. And just thank you, last poem, but thank you again so much for coming. Recently, there has been an infestation of crows. Today, they fill the sky like cutouts of black paper. When my sister visits, neither she nor I can hear the other over the barking dogs in the park. We keep talking. We walk the path behind my apartment until we can no longer feel our legs. I prefer public transportation if the distance is too great, but in private in most other ways. The wolf wants to eat the girl and the girl's grandma. His coat can't be removed with the ease of the girl's hood. It took months of living in Houston before I was willing to climb behind a wheel. I like to be in motion, the sun rising, the part of morning that is still dark, my car the only car on the road, lone wolf. There is no stopping, every light burns green. When I think of the riding part of Little Red's hood, I think of the wolf. Little Red Wolfhood. I used to get trashed, but like a good girl, left my car. I had in mind which man would put a roof over my head until I was sober enough to hit the wheel again. Once, while shopping, my cart was stopped with a hand. I looked like the man's first love. He was sorry for staring. I have her eyes. Is she dead? I wanted to ask. There are no woods in our suburban Houston, though some boast nature paths. I wait to groans of school buses. Good girl, our neighbor's second grade son kneels to pat his dog. The lab only recognizes goodbye. She does not know when to stop, when no means no, how to sit, girl sit. She does not understand what the boy means when he pushes her down on her haunches. Bad. I have more selfies of my sister and me than I have photos of anything. Today we snap funny faces, the crows form the backdrop, the sky breaks open, and we pull up our hoods. The first time I saw a dead crow was on my honeymoon. I found it on the doorstep of our cabin. We had been horseback riding in the mountains. Really, I was given a pony. Tiny horse for a tiny person, the tour guide said as I swung my leg around the saddle. After I saw that crow, I glanced up to find a startled woman staring back. It had flown into the glass door that my husband slid back. Don't kill it, I blurted, a reflex. In the jacuzzi, I drew my tired legs to my chest. The lip of the tub was guarded by towels wrangled into swans. The water smelled like hay and apples. My pony had been no match for the cliffs. It could not keep up with my husband's stallion. I am not a small person. Sometimes before bed, while I rifled through the day's events, I considered the choices I had and how often I chose wrongly. When the Uber arrives, my sister runs ahead. I find red strands in my brush, a pillowcase stained from her hair dye. My sister sends me her driver's information. I time her journey and keep every screenshot of his license plate. Every morning I run, hoodie drawstrings knotting my chin. I count each breath. I never tame my desire. I feed it like a pet. Long ago, I scratched away every mirror, pressed my paws together, tongued a tiny claw lodged between my teeth. I was never good at seeing myself clearly. I would never know how to stop telling myself the same story. Thank you. Thank you so much. Now I have the enormous privilege to introduce Lee Upton. I want to say too, just to thank my mother for inviting me to read alongside you. I've been deeply admired your work my entire life, and it's just a profound privilege, so thank you again. Lee Upton is, and this is a very condensed biography of just then all the accomplishments Lee Upton has, but Lee Upton is a poet, novelist, and essayist. Her literary mystery, Wrongful, is out now, yay. Her comic novel, Tabitha Get Up, was launched in May 2024. Her most recent book of poetry is her 7th collection, The Day Every Day Is, winner of the Saturnalia Book Prize. A third novel, The Withers, asks questions about how self-trust can be reclaimed even in the most unjust and horrifying circumstances, and will appear in 2026 from Regal House Publishing. A sequel to Tabitha Get Up is forthcoming in 2026. Lee Upton is also the author of 2 collections of short stories, Visitations, Stories, and the Tao of Humiliation, and Swallowing the Sea, on Writing and Ambition, Boredom, Purity, and Secrecy. She authored Ambrosia, an ebook story published digitally in the Working Titles series from the Massachusetts Review, and an award-winning novella, The Guide to the Flying Island, as well as 4 books of literary criticism. She really is astonishing. Lee Upton's poetry has appeared in numerous anthologies and in 3 editions of the Best American Poetry, and in the New Yorker, American Poetry Review, Dublin Poetry Review, and many other magazines. She's the recipient of numerous awards, and also wrote a libretto. She's just incredible. I'm just going to also give you a little taste of what others have said about Wrongful. Nimble, funny, playful, versatile Lee Upton has long been one of my favorite writers, and what a multi-layered treat Wrongful is. Here we have all the usual joys of Upton's prose: clever dialogue, great tonal range, psychological subtlety, a wit that's razor sharp without ever feeling mean-spirited, in service of a well-made and engrossing murder mystery. That was from Michael Griffith. And then the novelist and short story writer Olivia Claire Friedman had this to say: "This book is addictive. Lee Upton has created a world of characters you won't want to say goodbye to. Her writing is sharp, surprising, and entertaining. I love Wrongful for its humor and wisdom, but also for the characters that keep you guessing." Please join me in welcoming Lee Upton to the stage.
Reading. Can we have a hand again? It was fabulous. I love the slimy doily, the lettuce, hamburger at the Kmart. It's shut down now. Sorry to tell you. I'm going to read 2 short portions from Wrongful. Wrongful is a novel where people get things wrong, so I very much identify with the whole kind of movement in the novel. It's set at 2 literary festivals. At the first festival, a popular novelist, Mira Wallace, disappears. 10 years later, a young woman who'd been at the original festival returns to a festival in honor of Mira Wallace's legacy to try to figure out what happened and why it happened. In so many ways, the novel is about people behaving badly. So it was such fun to write. So much of life is spent trying not to behave badly. So the novel was part about envy, betrayal, all the things that make life interesting, I think. I'm going to read a portion. One thing that might be helpful to know, at the beginning of the novel, several writers or people in publishing already know that Mira Wallace somehow can't be found. They're on the shores of a lake, they're discussing her. So much of the novel, the beginning portion of the novel, we enter into multiple people's minds. Then later in the novel, we move into one person's mind, and she's not a writer, she's a reader. So much of the novel is a reader's perspective. And then at the end of the novel, we enter again into the minds of the women who began the novel. One of those women who will later be a suspect in the disappearance of Mira Wallace, a popular novelist who writes children's books and also somewhat erotic novels, is Inger Inger Delft. She's a publisher, but she made the mistake of passing by on not publishing Mira Wallace's work. She could have been a very wealthy woman, but she didn't do that, and now she is at the festival. So we're going to enter her mind for a few moments, and then at the end of this section, you will see a few of the other characters quite briefly. So again, this is in the publisher Inger Delft's mind. She's on the shore, listening to the other women speak. The publisher Inger Delft, yards away on the bank, listened to the women without joining in or turning toward them. She had her own opinions, which she never would voice aloud, opinions that were ready to burst into words if she weren't cautious. She had unwavering opinions, that's for sure. For instance, such as how, if she had been Mira's publisher, she wouldn't have let one single sentence go by. No, Mira's sentences never giving off light, not even the dimmest dying battery crackle. Those books Mira wrote for adults, they were for children, really. And the books she wrote for children, they weren't for anybody. I could have saved her infinite pain, Inger imagined. Or should I say, Inger told herself, I could have saved her readers' pain. And now Mira had disappeared from the conference, Emily Dickinsing it all, holding away, skipping panel presentations she was supposed to respond to. So where was she? She's not dead. That wouldn't follow the logic of the plots she foists on readers. No woman is ever harmed in her novels, except for the first cadaver as an inciting incident. Always, no matter what, a happy ending for women. That's how much she manipulates her readers. Could vanishing be a marketing ploy? Abler Books makes Mira Wallace their cash cow, and so now to juice up new interest, she's disappeared? She funds a festival, a celebration of her work and influence, much of it masturbatory. And on the second day, she gets people worked up, wondering where she is, who she's with, why she's run away. The worst attendees traipse down to this dishpan dirty lake and moan about her like she's stuck in a crab pool and they're ready to consult the runes, as in that Viking movie from my childhood, a childhood absolutely wonderful because her children's books weren't in it. And as a consequence, I wasn't subjected to the sort of contrivances that would have created in any healthy child an aversion to rabbits. In book after book, her rabbits make stew, so no one puts them in a stew because they're already on to the game. Like she's writing a survivalist guide for rodents. Enough, the day is young, time for Inger to look over her notes for her first presentation. What wisdom could she impart? Should she say, I don't know what I can tell you that will give anyone hope about the state of publishing? Should she lie, pretend optimism, tell the audience that if I myself ever wrote a book, say a book about this festival, I'd write about a gorgeous sorceress who makes the bland and tolerable disappear. Even if I added rabbits, I'd sprinkle them with bad attitudes so that little girls don't think their natural ruthlessness is anything to be ashamed of. Was that a torn garbage bag floating in the lake? She really needed to get her eyes checked. She blinked, shook her head, blinked again. The turtle was aiming toward her, its long neck stretching like a snake half hiding under a heavy backpack. Maybe people regularly fed turtles in the lake. If that turtle expected to get something from her, it was a bit of an idiot. Before Inger turned around to head back to the conference center, a plaintive voice rang out. Why doesn't anyone know where she is? No one had noticed Geneva Finch standing silent as a rabbit beside one of the spindly pines. The girl even looked like a rabbit, Inger thought, a feral rabbit, stringy and dingy-haired, soiled like she popped out of a burrow. The girl repeated herself, took one step closer. Tama cleared her throat and answered, It's a no-show for the time being, more than a disappearance. Mira likes deceptions, that's what I'm betting. Don't fret, honey, she'll turn up. After all, it wasn't like wanking Agatha Christie's famous disappearance. No husband's mistress involved, no elaborate cover story developed, no string of obvious lies. Louisa nodded in the girl's direction and raised her voice. We're all concerned, but I'm sure Mira's not trying to deceive. Tama laughed. Oh, people want to be deceived. They pay for it. What else is fiction for? Inger, what are you doing over there? I bet you agree. Inger spoke for the first time. She'll turn up, she said. It would be a loss to literature if we didn't hear from her again. To anyone listening, her voice sounded like a wish more than a prediction. And I'll read you just another little portion from another character. This character is, I can see you when I take this off. This character is Louisa Chaudet. I always pronounce it Chaudet in my mind, but I think she would pronounce it Chaudet now that I've got to know her more. I love her. I love all the characters, even the worst behaving, even the most duplicitous, even the wrongdoers. Louisa Chaudet is a fiction writer, and she has not had much luck in a while, and she's there at the conference as one of the panelists and also one of the featured speakers. Also, I should mention she's on a walk. She's on a walk and she's thinking. So later in the book, there's a lot of action, but as I'm first introducing the characters, I let you see the contours of their minds for a bit. And these are the contours of Louisa Chaudet's on the path. The path thinned, brambles clotting on both sides of the path. She was soon amid sumac and black-eyed Susans and purple-headed thistles ranging higher than her head. The sun's warmth on her shoulders bore down. Strangely enough, it was relaxing to feel a bit lost. Maybe getting lost was exactly what Mira had wanted, and that's why no one could find her. Mira could be stumbling along the path at any minute. The urge to confess, what Louisa almost did just minutes ago, confess to those women, Tama and Yolanda, and then that strange straggle of a girl asked her question, startling them, and the moment was gone. Thank God. Louisa's confession would have done nothing for anyone, might have even harmed her terribly. Really, she was saved by that girl's question, saved from the impulse to destroy her own life when her life was pretty much already destroyed. Louisa Chaudet could have told the other woman that she thought she saw Mira Wallace last night right there in the lake. While taking an after-dinner walk, Louisa heard splashing and imagined that the person in the water was a stranger thoroughly enjoying herself. How exciting to swim at night, to put all your fears away, to let yourself splashily careen around under the stars. Her next thought, I know who that is. That's Mira Wallace, probably having a marvelous time in the lake for the past half hour, while the rest of us ate that inedible dinner with those terrifyingly tiny shrimp glued into their soda. That's just like Mira Wallace, relishing her solitude and swimming alone, needing no one, communing with nature and her own soul. Mira was that self-sufficient, that cold-hearted. During yesterday afternoon's first session, Louisa had performed terribly on a panel when talking about her own work and Mira Wallace's influence. How indifferent Mira had looked as she sat in one of the high-backed upholstered chairs, hardly listening, her eyes closed. Maybe she was actually sleeping throughout the entire panel presentation. Mira Wallace was an icon, while Louisa was someone to ignore, at best to tolerate. Louisa's talk was, she told herself, was so blubbery and inconsequential, too self-deprecating. At one moment of particularly high tension, she couldn't see the page she was reading from, and her mind did this mirroring thing, and she saw herself, but not as a human woman. She saw a giant walrus with flat pancake hands. Thank God she snapped back into herself and read again from her paper during the question and answer session what possessed her to talk herself down all the more, admit and elaborate on her failures, tell everyone, even Mira Wallace, that she was an 8th grader. What did that even mean? But look at her life in the past years, won't you? Louisa practically had to sell her novels out of the trunk of her car, like Jacqueline Suzanne before she got famous. All these thoughts passed through Louisa Chaudette's mind as she watched the person in the water, and at last noticed that Mira's arms were either flailing or waving. Maybe she was drowning. The way the body of the water was turning about, and then the head going under, and it was all so quiet suddenly, like watching a silent movie. As she walked among thistles, Louisa reprimanded herself about the previous night. I didn't do anything. I didn't call out to Mira or turn and run for help or, can you go to prison for that? And oh God, forgive me for what I did when I saw Mira drowning. I turned away and ran up the ridge. Louisa could imagine the look of revulsion that would have passed over the other women's faces if she confessed. But then, she reminded herself, after first hurtling away from the lake and up the ridge, she turned around and headed back to the shore, prepared to jump into the lake and save Mira Wallace. When she reached the gravel beach, she yelled God knows what across the water until a stranger came stomping out, spraying lake water and cursing. What's wrong with you? The woman shouted, and Louisa muttered, everything's wrong with me. The swimmer turned out to be the daughter of the main chef at the conference hotel's restaurant. And now today, by an odd coincidence, Mira Wallace couldn't be found, had disappeared exactly as if Louisa's awful thoughts made her vanish, as if the woman in the lake had been Mira after all, and Louisa let her die. It was horrible, that thought. Louisa was glad she never had to confess how far she'd fallen from goodness, how sinister her thoughts had become, as if they weren't her thoughts at all, but contagious, something she caught at the festival. Mira Wallace, those adult novels will die out first, Louisa imagined. The children's books, though, those might have lodged into too many little minds. Yes, all those books that Mira wrote, someday the landfills will be packed with them. Seeing that woman in the lake, a woman she thought was Mira Wallace, until Louisa realized she was disappointed that the swimmer she imagined drowning wasn't the novelist at all. Louisa Chaudette hadn't known she hated Mira Wallace. Even now, shame heating her face, she hoped there wasn't a search party. She circled back on her meandering walk, and there, ahead of her, loomed the conference center's upper parking lot, right where it should be. She was never lost, although lost in her thoughts. At least Louisa Chaudette herself wasn't the sort of person who abandons her readers. And the fuller truth about yesterday, she hadn't seriously considered jumping into the lake to save the person she thought was Mira Wallace. No, but she did return to the lake on almost a trot. Thank you. Thank you so much for reading. Thank you, Book and Puppet again, and thank you again, Theodora. We have champagne, bang. We have champagne out here and a beautiful, beautiful cake made by Judy Leonard, and Theodora and I will sign any books you'd like, and we want to thank you again for this, and want to have lots of opportunity to talk with all of you, so thank you again.